I don't know how many of you can remember your childhood, but lots of times when we're children, we have dreams, we have hopes, we have these things we idealize that we want to do someday when we're older. And then as we get a little bit older, sometimes life happens and those things don't happen to us. I'm curious, how many of you could remember possibly what your dream was for your life? And can you also remember what happened in your life that caused that dream to go dormant? Now here's the interesting thing. If we were to go over next door to our children's center and talk to children, or if you were to walk into a first grade classroom tomorrow morning, and you would ask kids what they want to be when they get older, you would notice children have no filters. They would just flat out tell you that they have an ideal, they have a hope, they have even a goal, no matter how realistic or unrealistic it is. Some of them would say, I want to be an astronaut. Do you know that's still the #1 goal according to certain research groups? Kids want to be an astronaut. Some would say, I want to be an actor, I want to be a musician. Some would say, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be an athlete. Some would say, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be in construction. Some would say, I want to be a dad. Some would want to say, I want to be a mom. Kids have all kinds of dreams and ideals. When I was a little guy growing up, many of you are aware, I loved football. My adult neighbor introduced me to it when I was like 6 years old, and I've loved it my entire life. As a little guy, in our community, the elementary kids had an organized league where we weren't allowed to play tackle football, but we played flag football. So organized leagues, you had your team, you had your NFL teams, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was on the Packers, and my Sunday school teacher was actually the coach. And we did our practices in our city park. And when we went into practice, first thing he did is we come together and we would do a few calisthenics. And then he would point. There were about 200 yards away was one utility building. About the other end of the park was another utility building. Depending on what he wanted to do to help us with our exercise, our stamina, getting us in shape, he would say, okay, I need you to run 1 lap around that building or 2 laps around that building. And here's what we would do. We would run out to the building, and then when we thought we were out of coach's eyesight, we'd stop and walk around it. And as we came out the other side, we'd start running again. See, we did just enough to get by, right? Just enough for the coach to think that we were doing what we needed to do. And we would do it in the long run, and I kind of got into that habit, just enough to get by. I go into junior high, 7th grade year, 8th grade year, kind of the same thing. We'd have to go out and run sprints and laps around the track and all that stuff. And I liked playing football and I liked practice, but there are things that, at that age and stage, I never took that seriously. I did just enough to get by. My freshman year was a whole new situation because I'm a freshman, but I'm also playing with seniors. And while I still enjoyed all that stuff, there was still where I came from, even among the seniors who were supposed to be setting the precedent for us and setting the goals, still that attitude of just enough to get by. And I fell into it as a freshman. But my sophomore year, something changed. Some of it had to do with my role on the team. Some of it had to do as I was beginning to grow and mature a little bit. And I no longer wanted to settle for just enough to get by. In fact, I went to my coach. And I said, I want to do better. I want to do more. What are some drills I can be doing in my own time or after practice or in the off season? What are some exercises I can incorporate into my life that will allow me to do more? And the reality is most people in life, in their jobs, marriages, families, churches, in our health, in our vocational and avocational pursuits, have a tendency to do just enough to get by. Rarely do we ask, how can we do more? How can we have more? How can we be more? And the Bible has a very, very brief but very telling story about a family who had kind of been doing just enough to get by. It's like smack dab in one of those Old Testament genealogies. It was like this writer was walking through the cemetery one day going, father of, child of, son of, mother of. And then he hit this one guy and he stopped and he paused. And he took just a moment to elaborate on that guy's backstory. It's there in your worship folder. We're going to pop it up on the screen. It's found in the Old Testament book of 1 Chronicles. How many of you read 1 Chronicles the last year just studying God? It's not the most book most people go to. This young man is named Jabez. And here's the story. Now Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. Maybe we need to find out why he was more honorable, why it was about they just got by, but what did he do more of that made him more honorable? You still with me? Every once in a while, just let me know that. I get nervous. Jabez was more honorable than his brothers, and his mother named him Jabez, saying, because I bore him with pain. How many of you have named your children and grandchildren Jabez? How many of them are just a big pain in your life? That's literally what his name means. Now check this out. They don't tell us when or how old he was, but at some point Jabez decided he didn't want to just get by, he wanted more. Now Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my borders, and that your hand might be with me, and that you would keep me from harm, that it may not pain me. And then, what's that last verse say? And God told him what an idiot he was. Didn't happen, did it? And God granted him what he asked. Now, we're not going to go through all of this. Many of you maybe read the book 30 years ago by Bruce Wilkinson. We're not going to regurgitate that book. But I was thinking about this as I thought about stepping into this series called Inspired, with this morning's little tagline, Inspired for More. That we don't want to just get by in life, in whatever age and stage we find ourselves in. Now, Jabez did this, and this is one of the things that made him more honorable than his brothers. He asked God to bless him, and he didn't just ask God to bless him, he asked God to bless him indeed. Now, when you ask God to bless you, that's one thing. You say, God bless me indeed. Indeed, parenthetically, means a great deal, or abundantly, or over and above, or over and beyond. And I thought about this week in very, very personal ways. Who's ever running a camera? I'm about to drive you nuts for a minute. When we think about that, I thought about our friend Mary Beth over here. Mary Beth had an issue of concern in her family this week. She posted it on Facebook. How many of you maybe saw her social media post? I saw it a few days after she posted it. But what blew me out of the water wasn't so much her transparency and willingness to ask her church for help, but the number of responses that came from all of you. And many of you prayed for her. I ended up talking to her once I found out about it, prayed for her over the phone. But you prayed for Mary Beth. You helped bear the burden that was Mary Beth's. You asked God to bless Mary Beth, right, in your prayers. I would imagine that some of you, just as I this week, prayed for James as he steps into this role and asked God to bless him and bless this team and to help serve our church and our congregation. I know that every single one of our adults who volunteer in Awana have a prayer partner who's praying for them, ideally on a daily basis, but for certain on a weekly basis. And you pray for the Awana program. That's our Thursday night children's ministry. You pray for the volunteer who's serving in Awana, or maybe this week you prayed for whatever missionary it is you support, or whatever organization that serves the less fortunate than you, and asking God to bless them and feeling unworthy for God. And what happens when we begin to internalize those kinds of feelings and we don't follow kind of an outline that God has used throughout all of human history, is we literally play into the lies that lead us into the hands of Satan. See, Satan wants you to feel inadequate. Satan wants you to feel overwhelmed. Satan wants you to feel unworthy. Because when you internalize those kinds of feelings, those kinds of self-expression, then you're less likely to go to our Father and say, God, I'm your child. Bless me more than I deserve. And so we have a tendency to pull back. I heard about a man recently who died and went to heaven. He sent me a text. Jesus grants them access into heaven. St. Peter's giving the tour, and they're walking around, and they're looking at the streets of gold, and they're looking at all the mansions, and they're going around, and there's this one big giant room right in the middle of heaven. And Peter doesn't say anything about it. He just curves and goes around. Then they go down by the water, and they're having all these things, and there's heaven's banquet table, and he grabs a drumstick, and they're going along. And finally he goes back to Peter and says, Peter, why did you show me everything if you skipped that one big room? Peter said, oh, we don't need to go in there. God says, I want to know what's in there. I want to know all about heaven. I've lived my life for this. Peter says, I don't think you want to go in there. God says, I want to go in there. So Peter goes up, punches in the code, opens the door, and a guy walks in. And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of big boxes all arranged alphabetically since the Adam and Eve through the end of time. And the man said, do I have one of these in here? And Peter said, yeah, you have one of these in here. And the man said, well, where's mine? They went and they found it. The man pulled out his box, and Peter just kind of steps off the side and drops his head because he knows what's coming. The man opens the box, and then you see his face. You see his body language. And Peter's like, I've seen this before, I didn't want to do this. Because inside the box were the hundreds, if not thousands of blessings that God had in store for him. He just never asked God for them. And I don't want that to be our scenario in life. We get caught up in the legalism about whether we're good or bad or right or wrong, about what we do deserve or what we don't deserve. And, we're only going to get this blessing. We can only ask God for that if I'm worthy, but I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or about something, God, I will change if I'll hold off and ask you until I change, or I don't qualify for that blessing. God, we don't even ask God. Here's one of the times we don't ask God, but we know we've been disobedient. Anybody here willing to admit that you've been disobedient in the last 30 days? The rest of you are just liars. You're just disobedient. And we don't want to go to God because we feel unworthy in our disobedience, and yet God, out of His grace and His love and His mercy and His abundance, says, it's okay, you're still my child. How many of you have a child who did something wrong and you just never loved them again the rest of their lives? They're still your child, right? And my advice to you this morning, based on this passage and as we go deeper in this conversation, is, folks, God wants to do great things in us, with us, and through us because He calls us His children. And all parents want great things for their children. Where do we think we get that idea? And even in the midst of your good days and your bad days, let God be God. Let God be our Father, our Redeemer, our salvation, our holiness, our righteousness, our giver. I'm not talking about some televangelist form of name and claim it. I'm not going there. I'm talking about a basic spiritual principle in life, about just going to God and saying simply to God, God, I trust you. What do you have for me? And that's what Jabez did. His family had just kind of been doing enough to get by. They weren't willing to go the extra mile. They weren't changing anything. They had some family problems, and I don't know specifically, and scholars are uncertain about whether she had a difficult childbirth, and that's why she named him Jabez, or because there was so much ongoing family pain, she didn't want another child, but she had to give birth to this one, and that's why she named him Jabez. The Bible doesn't tell us that. It just tells us that he was born in the midst of a bunch of pain, and he asked God to bless him. And in part of that blessing, Jabez knew that what he had and what his family had wasn't enough, and so he asked God to enlarge his territory. Now, they were a family of farmers. And as Jabez began to have some success in farming, he realized that his property size wasn't sufficient to his business plan, and he wanted more, and so he asked God to give him more. He said, God, that you would enlarge my boundary or enlarge my territory. A little bit later on, scholars tell us that Jabez actually had so much success as a farmer and had so much influence in the community that he became a government official. And they went to war against another country or another tribe. And he prayed the same prayer. God, if our country is going to continue to flourish and we're going to continue to serve our people, we're going to continue to honor you, then God, we need you to enlarge our boundaries, to enlarge our territories, and give us the enemy at your hand. For some of us, it might be, God, I'm doing pretty well in my business or in my practice, but God, give me more business. As it relates to us sitting in this room this morning, well, we'll hit a rabbit trail in a minute or two. Maybe God's looking on Connect Church, not corporately, but He's looking at us individually as we sit here in our individual seats. And the prayer that God's compelling us to pray is, God, give me, insert your name, more ministry. Now, most of us don't ask God for this. We don't ask God for this because we already feel a little bit overwhelmed. We feel a little bit swamped. We want to have a little bit of balance in our lives. And you're like, I'm already doing quite a bit, and I don't want to ask God for more, because if we ask God to bless us here, God's going, no, I'm not going to bless you there. You're doing what you've always been doing. But if you want to come over here where I am, I'll bless you. And I'll give you more. And I'll give you more ministry. And I'll give you more influence. And you're like, no, God, I'm comfortable right here. Draw a little box. And then we say, God, you know I love you, and God, I enjoy going in here and having you worship God. He has a really nice voice, and God, David made me laugh a time today, but God, a time or two, but God, I don't really want more because my life is so full. God, if you put one more pea on my plate, the whole plate's going to tumble over. When you ask God to enlarge your territory, you're not asking God to put one more pea on your plate and give you a fuller plate. You're asking God to give you a bigger plate to which you can put more types of things on. And you're like, God, that's nice of you, God, but I'm not sure that's what I want. God, I don't know if I'm willing to say, hey, God, here's my territory, here's my boundaries, but God, you have my permission to create new boundaries. You have my permission to go across the landscape of my life and tear down all of my fences. God, you have my permission to move whatever it is you want to move. And God, you have my permission to put me in a position where I'm going to have to risk failure to find what you want from me. God, if I have to go out and risk failure, that's going to fill me with insecurity. God, I just don't really like those kinds of feelings. And so, God, I'd just be happier if you just bless what I have, and I'm just going to dwell here in my comfort zone. Folks, can I let you in a little secret? God will never bless your comfort zone because God doesn't dwell in your comfort zone. God always dwells outside of your comfort zone, and He's trying to bring you to where He is. And we wrestle with those kinds of things, and they are uncomfortable to us. And so what it is we have our little box. And we say, well, you know what, God? I got too much to do here in my little box. And God, because I'm so busy and I'm so tied up with the matters of my little box, God, I don't have time to do more. And God, I don't have the resources to give more. And God, it'd be okay with me if you just kind of took some of what I'm already doing and already have away. Now here's the question that's been bugging me about myself, and so if it bugs me, I might as well let it bug you. When was the last time you asked God to give you more, and you got on your knees and you begged Him for more ministry? God, give me more ministry. See, most of us don't ask God for this. God, give me more to do for you. Now, if you're feeling offended, you're in good company. It's been going on since the beginning of time. When God had about 1.5 million to 2 million people that He deeply loved who had found themselves locked into bondage, and they had no way out. And for the last 400 years, they've been slaves to the known world power of the day, and without some kind of help, probably the next 400 years they were, God decided that He wanted to free His people. And so God went out on the backside of nowhere, and He found this man who was tending somebody else's sheep. He didn't have a real job. They were actually his father-in-laws. He had been unemployed, and Daddy hadn't hired him. No offense. And he gets his attention when one of the sheep goes astray. He goes up this path, and he sees this bush, and it's burning, and it's not going away. And this man's name is Moses. Moses goes up, and God begins a conversation with him, and God begins to tell him about these great plans He has to free His people. And Moses' first response was, "Here I am. I know that's me. Here I am." And then God says, "Well, here's how this plan's going to play out. You and I are standing here, and you're pretty comfortable in this conversation saying, 'Here I am.' But for this to happen, you're actually going to have to go down here, and you're going to have to confront the king. You're going to have to confront the kingmakers. You're going to have to do A, B, and C." And then Moses looks at him and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. Who am I?" Now we go to a few chapters later, and we go into the book of Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 6, Isaiah, the Lord comes to Isaiah, and there's a lot of stuff going on that God's not happy with, and people are rebellious, and God wants to speak a word into their lives, kind of a prophetic word, kind of a negative word. He's going to bring some punishment, but then he wants to lead them beyond it, and he wants to do some corrective action, and then he'll actually bless them. And he's looking for a leader who would do this, and the same kind of conversation happens. God says, "Who shall I send?" And Isaiah goes, "Not me, I'm unclean." In other words, not me, I'm insecure. Not me, I'm overwhelmed. Not me, I'm unworthy. Same kind of thoughts that went through every single one of our minds this past week at some point or another. And God continues to minister to him, and God gets some help from some heavenly beings, and finally through the conversation, Isaiah says, "Here I am. Send me." Several years ago when I was pastoring in Georgia, I began to have those kinds of conversations with God myself, and I was overwhelmed. I didn't think I was smart enough to do what he was asking me to do. I didn't think I was wise enough to do what he was asking me to do. I didn't think I had the right kind of temperament to do what he was asking me to do. God began asking me if I would develop a kind of form of apologetics, if you will. Not the kind of deep stuff that Kyle teaches on Friday night in our group, but the kind of stuff that would make me conversational in a reasonable way with people primarily from other philosophies, ideals, or world religions who at least had a curiosity about Christianity. And I began to explore some writings and listening to some teachings on that kind of stuff. But how do you know if you're becoming conversant in it until you actually have a conversation? And the next thing I know, in metropolitan areas across the country, as I began to look back, literally just this past week, I see where God used me to have conversations with some people from Islam. Just 2 weeks ago, he had me have an interesting conversation with a new friend who says, "I'm pretty much an agnostic, maybe an atheist. If I were going to pick a religion, I would pick Buddhism." And he began to tell me all the reasons why he would pick Buddhism. Except he wasn't telling me about Buddhism, he was telling me about Hinduism. But he's a new friend, and I thought I'm going to have multiple conversations with this guy in the future. He just doesn't know it. I won't correct him now. I'll let him have his moments. And right on down the line, and then I'm out a few years ago, I'm promoting a conference up in the Midwest. And I'm doing a radio interview. And they didn't tell me they were going to do this. The host just started doing it. I was talking about the conference and the church would be hosting and what we would be doing and that kind of stuff. He opened up the show to callers live on the air to ask me anything they wanted. Never knowing, when I was pastoring in Georgia back in 2004 and 2005, that in 2013, God was going to open the door, 2012, for me to do a radio interview in a city I'd never been to before, and people to call in and ask me anything they wanted. Do you think I was just a little bit uncomfortable? Would you think me arrogant if I told you in that moment that the Holy Spirit washed over me? I was able to recall some of the stuff that I had been studying, and I answered every single question according to the person's need. That's the power of the Holy Spirit. That's not the intelligence of your pastor, and most of you are well aware of that. But that's how God works. In church, here's the deal. Take 2 seconds and look around this room. Now give me a break, because this isn't supposed to be a black box, and we're about to get some of the other stuff on the walls fixed over the next week or two. But those of you who have been with us for a little while can think back to when we started forming this little group, putting a plan together, when we were meeting in a storefront at the intersection of Main and Greenfield. You think God's enlarged our territory? But God's enlarged our territory. We now have a bigger plate. He didn't put more beans on our plate. He gave us a bigger plate. And now who is going to personalize this for God and ask Him to inspire you for more? You might want to ask God how He's going to inspire you for more in this church, or in your family, or in your job, or in this community. who's going to ask God to inspire you for more of this. You can have life beyond your comfort zone. And yes, it's going to be full of fear. And it's going to be full of insecurity. And yes, that's the only way to grow, because as you grow, you will become more and more comfortable in a different box. And now you have a bigger box. It's like you've got a box about the size of this one. And you've been comfortable there. But you take this under consideration. You begin to cry out to God, asking to do more in your job, in this church, in this community, in your relationship. And now you've got this box. And you begin to pray, and God begins to bless, and you grow comfortable in this box. And God says, but I'm not satisfied with that box. So you begin to ask Him more. And now God gives you this box. And He's calling us for more and more and more, because God wants His lost children found. And if you fought 5 giants in your life, and you come up against giant number 6, it's not that big a deal. But if you've never fought a giant, it's pretty scary, right? And yet every time you move into an area of discomfort, God is enlarging your territory, and He's drawing you to where He is. Now that's a whole lot of introduction to the actual message. If you're looking there in your outline, there are 3 different principles to life that come out of this that are as applicable to us today as they were for Jabez back then. Principle number 1 is this. Stop avoiding discomfort, because that is where you grow. See, your comfort zone is where you are today. But your discomfort zone is where your dream lives. Our comfort zone is where we are as a church today. We do our Sunday mornings. We have our connection groups. We have a lot of Our discomfort zone is what God wants to do through us to reach the 85205 and maybe beyond. See, let me ask you a question. And I want you to answer this in the margins of your worship folders. And I'm going to ask you for an umbrella of grace, because this is going to be a little bit awkward for some of you. I don't know who. I just know it is. What did you do this week to make yourself better than you were last week? What did you do this week to make your marriage better than it was last week? Let me ask you this. What did you do this week to make Connect Church better than we were last week? Most of us have settled for staying in our comfort zones because we didn't want to grow through our discomfort. Second thought is this, key principle. Stop valuing comfort so that you may operate in the Spirit. If I'd have stuck to my comfort zone, I never would have had those conversations with New Age people and Muslim people and Buddhist people who were actually Hindu people, but they didn't know it. Would have never had those kind of conversations with atheists and agnostics and done a call-in radio show. See, folks, here's the problem. In our humanity, okay, we compare ourselves for others. And when we compare ourselves for others, we have a tendency to compare our norms, or maybe even our worst, against their best. And when we do that, we shrink back, and there's no room for God to do anything. Let me give you a secret. Whatever pastor, whatever minister, whatever business leader, whatever parent, whatever coach you look up to who inspires you, I want you to know something. They started in a box right about here. And to go to the next level with Jesus, to go to the next level with their church, to go to the next level in their business or in their coaching or in their influence or in their parenting, at some point in time they had to move to this box. And then they had to move to this box. And then they had to move to this box. Then they had to move over here to Kyle's box. Now what happens is, we see ourselves in that box over there, but we never see them having started there. We only see them existing here. And we shrink back, and we stay in our comfort zone, and we don't grow, and we stay there, when all along the way, God's got multiple boxes and multiple blessings to expand and do similar things according to His plan and His purpose for us. If we would start saying yes and stop saying no or why me. Those are the kinds of things that God is calling us to. The kinds of things He wants to do in our lives. Now here's the question most of you want answered in this moment. Okay, David, you've got my curiosity. How? The Old Testament. The prophet Zechariah. How many of you have grandchildren named Zechariah? The Old Testament, the prophet Zechariah, chapter 4, said these words. Not by might, nor by power, but by the level of your education. Not by might, not by power, but how long are you going to Connect Church? Not by might, not by power, but because you're a millennial. Said nobody. No offense, millennials. Thanks for having a joke at your expense. The Bible says loud and clear, read it with me. Not by power, by Spirit, says who? So David didn't say that, right? Our elders never wrote that in the church bylaws, right? Says the Lord Almighty. Here's how another translation puts it. Pop the next one up. You will not succeed on your own strength or by your own power, but only by my Spirit, says the Lord, all-powerful. Bruce Wilkinson, who wrote that book 30 years ago, The Prayer of Jabez, says this. He, through you, does it. He, through you, does it. You want to know the cool thing about that saying? You, by God's direction, get to determine and have say-so in what it is. See, that's actually the real story of Jabez. There's no gift, there's no education, there's no status that requires you, that is required for you to do more for God. It's the power of the Holy Spirit freely at work in your life. Jesus said these words in John chapter 15. Jesus said, if you remain in me and follow my teachings, you can ask anything you want, and it will be given to you. You should produce much fruit and show that you are my followers, which brings glory to my Father. Now, let's go back and break this down. Jesus kind of sets this up in verse 7. He answers how in verse 8. You should produce much fruit. That's how we bring glory to the Father. Now think about that word glory for just a minute. Here the translation, and most translations, use the word glory. There are a couple of translations that use the word honor. But there are a couple of modern translations, or maybe we call them paraphrases, that don't use honor or they don't use glory. They use something along the lines of show off. So, you produce much fruit, and when you do so, you show off our Father. Isn't that cool? God just doesn't want us doing enough to get by. God wants to show off in our lives. See, pleasing God means asking God to do more. Do you know the Connect Church will have more impact on the 85205? When each one of us asks God to give more people for Him that we can touch through our daily lives. When we stop accepting self-imposed boundaries. When we stop accepting boundaries that other people impose on us. That's when this church will have more impact on the 85205. It is an individual as well as a collective thing. In fact, the collection is the sum total of our individual efforts. Did you get that? Let me ask you this. When will Connect Church have more money? When each of us asks God for bigger plates, when we can share more of His blessings and what we have. When will you have more in your marriage and in your family? When you begin to ask God for more love in your heart and more humility in your life? When will we have more ministry going on here at Connect Church? When each of us asks God to give us more ministry in our own life. You go, well, I'm doing as much as I can. This is going to hurt some of your feelings. I don't know who, I just know that it is. When are you going to ask God to give you more ministry in your life? And some of you are going, I'm doing as much as I can. No, you're not. You're doing as much as you've been doing. You're doing as much as you've been doing. See, here's the deal. We worry about overcommitting, and we worry about having balance in life, and there's some truth to that. But that's a different conversation for a different day. When we do those things, and we express that, mostly what we are is we are concerned about holding on to our own agenda, about staying in our own box. And in doing so, we've left no room for God. We've left no room for a bigger box. Which leads me to key principle number 3 in your life. Our Father is only limited by our own unbelief. Our Father is only limited by our own unbelief. Now here's the closing thought, and this is so vital to how you and I view life, how you and I view the ministry of this church, the bigger plate that God has given us. Growth means I have stopped asking, what can I do? And I have started asking, what does God want done? You see the difference? What if every one of us stopped asking, what can I do? And we started asking, what does God want done? See, asking God to bless you and expand your territory beyond your comfort zone means that you're choosing to step into discomfort and in the process, trust God. For some of us, that might mean that we have to go out and we have to lead a connection group or join a connection group. For others, it might mean we have to get involved in a ministry. For some, it might mean that we have to begin tithing. For others, it might mean we have to reach out to a neighbor. For some of us, it might mean we have to tell a teenager no. For some of us, it means we have to begin serving our community. For some of you in this room, it might mean you have to get a new job. Let me ask you this question. What would happen if every one of us in this room, for the next 30 days, said yes every time God asked us to do something? Now, I want to qualify that. I don't mean every time your pastor asks you to do something, every time your spouse asks you to do something, every time your neighbor asks you to do something, or every time your child asks you to do something. You know the voice of God as He speaks to you in whatever form He does that. What if every single one of us for the next 30 days, or if 30 days is too much for you, let's take a baby step, for the next 7 days, said yes to everything God asks us to do. Yes, God, I'll get involved in a connection group. Yes, God, I'll try to tithe for the next month. Yes, God, I'll serve in that ministry you've been asking me to serve in. Yes, God, I'll go and help the homeless. Whatever it is God asks you to do, what if every single one of us said yes? Can you imagine how exponential the impact would be as we move closer and closer to grand opening? Phillips Brooks, a great pastor from about 100 years ago in Manhattan, said these words one time. He said, "Do not pray for easy lives. Pray to be stronger people. Do not pray for tasks equal to your powers. Pray for powers equal to your tasks. Then the doing of your work shall be no miracle, but you shall be a miracle." I was in multiple meetings this week. And in 2 of those meetings, there was another individual that shared them with me. In the first meeting, as we were closing out and getting ready for prayer, he expressed a really, really burdensome prayer request. And then later in the week, in the second meeting, he expressed the same prayer request. This time, the weight seemed heavier. And I found myself asking the group to just go and gather around him, and I put my hands on his shoulders. And when I began to pray, I found myself essentially praying something along those lines. I didn't ask God to make his burden lighter. I didn't ask God to make the demands of his job easier. I didn't ask God to make his bosses more understanding or nicer. I asked God to raise him up and give him the strength to make him adequate to the task. And maybe that's what some of us need to be considering in our marriages. God, don't make my spouse nicer. It would help that if she or he isn't, make me more loving and adequate to lead them beyond that. Maybe we don't need to ask God for more money. Maybe we need to ask God to make us better at managing the money he's given us. Maybe we don't need to be asking God for more of this or more of that, and name this and claim that. Maybe we just need to be asking God to make us sufficient no matter what the challenge of life brings. Oh, that you would bless me indeed. That you would enlarge my territory. That your hand would be upon me and you would protect me from all evil. And at the end of that prayer, 1 Chronicles 4:10 says this, and God granted his request. And so God, what are the burdens? What are the pains? God, what are the comfort zones? The boxes. Some in this room are choosing to remain in. Whether it be a comfort zone of joy or a comfort zone of pain. And God, what's it going to take for them to ask you to lead them out of the comfort zone through the land of discomfort and uncertainty and insecurity and unworthiness to a bigger box where you are? For some in this room, God, when they ask you for more, it means more activity, more involvement, more engagement, more responsibility, more commitment. For others in this room, when they ask you for more, it might mean the elimination of some activity, some involvement, some ministry, so that they can be abundant in the thing that you want done, not necessarily the thing they want to do. God, if you have given Connect Church a bigger plate. It's not like we've got a dinky little salad plate and we've asked you for a 16-ounce ribeye. It's like you've given us a platter, but we're settling for a 6-ounce ribeye. God, what do you want to do individually so that we can have more impact on our neighbors, more impact on the baristas, more impact on our family, more impact on someone standing in line behind us at Walmart? We have no clue who they are. We just overhear a conversation and we said, this is for you. God, okay, pull me into their conversation. God, inspire us from the inside out for more, that you might bless us indeed and enlarge our territories. That you would place your hand upon us and protect us from all evil. God, the rest is up to you. We love you, we honor you, we worship you. We give you all prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.